Good morning. It was brought to my attention by my internship committee that I was remiss in properly introducing myself. As most of you know, my name is John Bloom-Ramirez. I'm a third-year student at the UU Seminary Meadville-Lombard Theological School in Chicago, Illinois, and I come to you from First Church Los Angeles, where I served under the Reverend Rick Hoyt McDaniels. When Reverend Hoyt McDaniels ended his contract at First Church, I was glad and grateful to have found a place to land here with Tapestry and Reverend Kent Doss. I will complete my second year of a 2-year internship with you folks. Theologically, I consider myself a UU pagan, more specifically a pantheist who embraces science and reason. I like to call myself a rational mystic. I live in Anaheim, just behind Disneyland, with my husband Renee, my son Jordan, whom some of you have met, our 2 cats, Rukia and Hades, and a Pomeranian named Polyphemus. Ask my son, he named him. When I'm not doing school, trust me, I do a lot of school, my biggest love is historical reenactment. I run a nonprofit theater company called the Guild of St. Marie, where I'm the director, primary costume designer, and pretty much the lead actor, portraying the French kings Francois I, Henri III, as well as various other historical persons when we perform as an English court. I love sewing, cooking, reading, and I adore history and museums. I too also read a lot myself, Connie. Our theme this month is hope. The Reverend Kirk Lodeman Copeland tells us that first comes wishing, which is a passive desire that we don't really put effort into. Then comes optimism, which he describes as being positive, that whatever it is that we're endeavoring to do will come out in the manner that we expect. Hope, he says, is different. It is resilient, enduring, courageous, and occasionally bold. Hope is a shapeshifter. It is an emotion and an attitude that keeps adapting to emerging circumstances. I want to repeat that definition. Hope is an emotion and an attitude that keeps adapting to emerging circumstances. One of the things that is required for entry into Unitarian Universalist ministry is that you complete 1 unit of clinical pastoral education. I did my CPE locally at Hogue, Irvine, down the street here, as a student chaplain. It was there that I encountered hope and the loss of hope daily. There I met a lady, we'll call her Linda. She was an older lady in the hospital for an unknown ailment. Abandoned by a husband who refused to see her sick, she was more worried about the fate of her mentally disabled son, who lived in her home rather than herself. Over the weeks that I visited her, her condition worsened, but still she held out hope that her husband would come to his senses. He never did. They were socially active in a fraternal organization of which he was the regional president. She was his 7th wife, and she was broken. This made her no longer of any use to him as a hostess and a first lady. Her friends visited her for a bit, but after a while, those visits tapered off as well. Matters were made worse when her son was brought to visit her, and he did not understand quite what was happening to his mother. He had to be taken away, and while she was sad, she approached it with resolve. Linda remained optimistic throughout her illness. When her optimism ran out, she held on to hope. Her hope was able to adapt to her circumstances. When she realized her husband was a lost cause, she hoped from visits from friends. When those exhausted, she hoped to get better for her son. When it was clear that she wasn't going home, she pragmatically accepted that the social workers were able to place her son in a group home. Every day, her hope shifted and changed focus. Her illness progressed to the point of dementia, and the last day I saw her, she mistook me for her husband. I didn't correct her. I couldn't take that last bit of hope from her. She passed later on that evening. Each time Linda was down, she allowed her hope to evolve and focused it on something she felt reachable. From this, I learned that hope, even at its most fragile, can be rekindled by the simplest act of kindness, a feeling that you belong and are not forgotten. A different patient, Bill, was a very devout Christian with his wife and 4 children. He was part of a local Baptist congregation, and we had some interesting talks about theology and what the Bible meant to him. He was there due to some digestive issues and was ill because his body could not expel waste properly. When I first met Bill, he was incredibly optimistic and was hopeful to get home to his family. While I knew friends from his congregation were visiting him and doing prayer circles for him, I still dropped by on occasion just to say hi. After a month in the hospital, his optimism turned to despair. And he eventually asked me to stop coming back to see him. He had his prayer group, and if prayers weren't going to help him, then what difference was I going to make for him? Not only had he lost his faith, he had lost hope. I did feel rejected, but I learned I could not take this personally. Not everyone wants your help, and they will have days where they welcome you with open arms, and then they might change their mind and ask you not to come back. You can hope for them that they will find the comfort that they need in the moment when it's most important. In this case, I truly hoped that Bill was getting it from his wife and his family, who were steadfast in their support and visits. I had to remind myself, John, it's not about you. It's about the needs of the person you're visiting. Another family I visited was devoutly Catholic. Carmen was a very stoic Latina matriarch who was accompanied by her family when I was called to visit with them. She wanted a Catholic priest for her husband who was dying, so I went into the office and made the call. Unfortunately, all of the priests in the 3 neighboring parishes were away at a retreat. I managed to get a hold of one of the office workers at the congregation furthest out, and she told me that there might be a priest doing his rounds at Kaiser, and she would see if she could get him over here. She told me to hope for the best, but expect the worst. I can honestly say I was terrified. How could I offer pastoral care to a family so very, very deeply Catholic and who was so different from my beliefs and culture? I focused instead on stories and happy memories, and that was enough for them. Hope in the form of reminiscence allowed this family some peace in the moment and allowed time for things to right themselves naturally. The priest did receive my message and was able to make it to deliver the anointing of the sick. I was humbled to be asked to stay and pray with this family as they let their father and husband go. Hospital chaplaincy takes training both before and during. I know I prepared by taking a full class on pastoral care at seminary before I completed my unit. These things are great for a future minister, but strip away the theology and what do you have? The basics of compassion, an affirming way to maintain a conversation. The biggest thing that I walked away learning was that people did not expect me to be a spiritual guide or to have all of their answers to the unasked questions they held within their hearts. They just wanted a friendly face that was willing to sit with them, who was actively listening to their wants and needs, who could remain calm in a stressful situation. Kindness, compassion, and love are powerful. They can change the world. What is the opposite of loneliness? Is it belonging? Because as humans, we need to belong. To one another, our friends and family, to our culture, our country, and to our world. Belonging is primal, fundamental to our sense of happiness and well-being. Social psychologist and Stanford assistant professor Greg Walton writes, belonging is a psychological lever that has broad consequences. Our interests, motivation, and health, happiness, they're all inextricably tied to the feeling that we belong together in a greater community that might share our interests and aspirations. I want you to take a moment and recall a time when you felt this way. Isolated, forgotten, or even worse, you were an afterthought. How did you feel? Lonely? Hurt? Abandoned? I know that I've been there and it doesn't particularly feel good. And it's not a fun place to be. I can recall not caring much about anything or having the energy to do anything else. Even in a crowded room or hospital, it is still possible to feel this way. A personal example for me is as an introvert. I loathe parties and large gatherings. I would make a terrible politician. I can be in a room of hundreds of other people and still feel as if I'm the only person in that room, let alone the world. Now imagine if you're connected to a dynamic faith community, your family, your home, and your pets. And then suddenly one day you aren't. Now as an introverted person, this is hard, but imagine how difficult that would be for someone who is extroverted, someone who thrives on being a social butterfly. During my time with You Good People, I must complete a focused initiative project. This project is designed to be sustainable. It should serve an underserved population of the church. That is, it should be needed by the congregation, and it should continue long after I've left you in June of next year. After much discussion with Reverend Doss, I've come up with a project that is both needed and sustainable. There are members of our congregation, of our church family, who are unable to attend service due to age-related limitations, including injury, illness, blindness, and memory loss. Reverend Doss and I identified several of these folks who could benefit from a visit by a member of the congregation so that they can maintain their connection to their social and spiritual home. Upon my return from school in February, I will be leading a workshop on the basics of general pastoral care, which will include information on how to engage someone and keep a conversation going, as well as personal boundaries and ethics. Participants will be part of a care team. After completion, participants will be matched with a member whom they will be assigned regularly to visit. It is my hope that this team will continue training new members as time goes on, so that there is a group of willing volunteers who can continue this work in the future. My dream is that this project will become second nature to this congregation, and that when a member is no longer able to attend, the automatic response is to assign a care team member so that the connection to this community never feels severed. Hope is a very precious, very vibrant, very fragile thing. By showing our friends a little bit of kindness, we can bring with that a little bit of hope. Through visiting members in need, we can deepen their connection to their spiritual community, and they will still feel as if they belong. These are my hopes for you and for this project. In the end, it'll make us even stronger, an even stronger congregation, holding up the inherent worth and dignity of all of our members, expanding the interconnected web of all existence to which we are a part. Let us allow our hope to adapt to these changing circumstances, learn how to be better, more compassionate Unitarian Universalists in the process. Amen.